good morning again, or good afternoon again. I hope everything's well with you. When we met last, I presented the concept that I'm sure everybody has become familiar with, and that's the unreasoning, unexplainable hatred that I guess we can say the left has for the right. Primarily the liberals, the Democrats, the news media, so forth, the hatred that they have for Donald Trump. I haven't found anybody that could really explain the reason for that. It's so outrageous. And as I explained last time, it's like a person, say with the news media, he can look at an event that's taking place where Donald Trump has done something beneficial for the nation, and they look at it and then turn right around and look the world in the face and say, that ain't what happened. This is what happened. The lies are unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Uh, one thing in point, I was watching a TV thing a while ago, and Biden was explaining that he could not understand why President Trump wouldn't just concede and turn everything over to him. Well, the fool hadn't been elected yet. Pardon my definition. Uh, they seem to think, for whatever reason, that the news media that has been so against and is so against everything America can declare Biden and Harris to have won, and that's the end of it. They just go ahead and it's Biden feels like maybe he can pack his little duffel bag and move into the White House. That ain't the way it works. And so, as of the time of this recording, there has been no there's been the end of the election, but there's been nothing called. The media cannot declare who's going to be the president of the United States. They may think they've got that kind of power, but they don't. But each state has to certify the election as to who won in the election. And then in the final analysis, without getting a lot into it, too deep into it, into the weeds, the Electoral College then meets and they make the final the final judgment as to who's going to be the president. So Biden can jump around, scream all he wants to, but he hasn't been elected to nothing. But like I said, in doing this, I don't really want to get into personalities, even though personalities are involved, because a human being must yield to whatever power is driving him. We all do it. We all get so underneath, depending on our lifestyle and so forth, it'll vary, but we get underneath the control of spiritual entities. With God, we voluntarily yield to him. With Satan, it's a matter of force, always has been. And so what I want to try to accomplish in these little sessions, it might take a couple of more of them, I don't know. I don't want to go so deep into it and take so long until you lose interest. I'd like to do something that's beneficial. But I want to try to dig into the history behind what's happening now, and then take it on into the future as to what will be the final outcome of what's happening now. And I assure you, it has been much bigger than it is now, than we perceive it to be, and it will in the future be much bigger. Now, I want to give you a list of the documents or the information that I use to help in bringing what I'm going to share with you into focus. Number one, of course, is the Bible. And I've used various versions of the Bible. I have a doctorate, a doctor of ministries in biblical research. So I do, maybe I didn't learn a whole lot, but I do know how to dig out information using the original language and come up with a pretty good understanding, I think, of what's being said. And I'm certainly not the only one that can do that, and I'm certainly not the best at it. But I do feel like that I've gotten a very unusual grasp, maybe, of what's taking place, looking beyond and back of, way in back of the human instruments that we see that are doing what's being done. And so what I want to do is go back into the past, all the way back to maybe even beyond the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve, some 6,000 years. There are a lot of things took place before that. And I want to try to make that understandable in a very understandable way, if possible. And then bring it right on up to date, because we are entering into what the Bible says is the end of this age, the end of this world system. A lot of you may know a lot about that. Some of you probably know more than I do about it, but I want to try to tie it all together for you. And I want to invite you, if you have any questions or disagreements or whatever, send me an email. It's the Ralph Turner Show at gmail.com. How much simpler can it be than that? And I will read your email. I will answer it back. I don't mind people disagreeing with me. My wife even disagrees with me ever so often. She's usually right. But now I'm not going to respond to any threats or whatever. I spent too many years in law enforcement to put up with that. But we can have a discussion on things, and I may learn from you, and hopefully you'll learn a thing or two from me. So the Bible was the primary source for the information I'm going to put out. Another is a documentary done by Dinesh D'Souza called Obama's America. And obviously that brings it on up to modern times, but I want to go back for the details in what we're going to share back to the beginning of the Obama administration. There were some particular things that took place then that had probably never taken place in the United States before. There were things leading up to a finale that was spoiled by God through Donald Trump. I'm not saying Donald Trump is a saint. God uses all sorts of people to bring out his will. It's even factual in the Bible that God has put evil kings. And I'm not saying that Trump is a king or that he's evil, but have put evil kings in, for instance, the Pharaoh in Egypt. The word says God raised the Pharaoh up to be the kind of a person he was, to show God's power in him as he forced him to release the children of Israel and let them go back to the promised land. Another one is Hillary's America. Hillary Clinton is not a very nice person. I think we all would understand that. But she played a role that perhaps you've never understood, never even considered in all of this. And I want to bring that out. And she's not through yet. She still has things she's going to do. Another one is The Death of America by Dinesh. And I think that has a few things in there that I want to bring into the play. And then the last one was a book that I released about a year ago called Just Suppose. And it presents a series of what ifs. Just suppose Hillary Clinton had have won the election in 2016. Just suppose Biden ultimately wins this election. And at the point that the book was written, didn't really know whether he was even going to run or not, but there were some things in there. Anyway, we'll and I'm showing you pictures of those. You see pictures of those books. And if you're interested, I invite you to go to Amazon. All of these books are available on Amazon as either Kindle books, ebooks, or as paperbacks. Now, as I said before, this hatred, and I kind of alluded to it before, didn't actually say it, but I'm saying it now. This hatred that we see now is according to a predetermined plan. It's all a part of God's permissive will to bring to fruition certain things in the history of the world and in the universe that must come to pass. As I mentioned briefly before, it's a plan that was hatched almost 6,000 years ago. And I'm glancing over at my notes. I don't want to get in the weeds. I want to make sure that we stay kind of on track here. And what we see as we look at all this, it involves a series of, number one, in many cases, missed timings by Satan. That's what has happened here that we're going to talk about quite a bit. And resultant retaliations by God to forcibly bring the progression of history back into line with what he is bringing to pass. Now, in the time we're living in right now, this is what, November the 10th, I think, or something like this. I don't pay much attention to the dates, but anyway, 2020. And at this point in time, and you'll see that if you go to YouTube and do a search, you'll come up with some kooks, but you'll come up with a lot of very credible, godly individuals that have made a serious study of God's word, especially in the area of prophecy. And you'll see that in many cases, they say things better than I'm going to say them because they're pros. But at any rate, we have a kind of a sameness in what's being said. Maybe we can put it that way. And so, without, again, getting too deep in the weeds, let me go back just in a conversational way without a lot of presenting facts and so forth. I want to make it as a conversation. And here again, you can certainly check it out. You can find most of it in the books that I've given you. And if you need more information, you're welcome to email me and I'll fire some information back to you. In Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1, the beginning of the Bible, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, what that's talking about is not just the earth, but the entire universe. In the beginning, when is the beginning? Who knows? God was in existence before the beginning. It's not talking about the beginning of God. It's talking about at the point when God set into motion the creative explosion, if you want to call it that, or whatever, that brought into existence our entire universe, including planet Earth. Now, the next verse says, and the earth was without form and void. Now, I don't want to get into any deep dissertation or whatever on the gap theory, but a good, solid study of the terminology that's being used, along with statements that are made in other places in the Bible, in Isaiah, in Ezekiel, in Jeremiah, and other places, we see that probably between those two verses, there could be perhaps billions of years. That's where the dinosaurs come in. Dinosaurs have not been on the earth since Adam and Eve. There had to be because they found evidence of it. So the most logical place for the dinosaurs to come into existence is between Adam and Eve. Also, such things as Neanderthals, and you find references to large cities that existed at a time period prior to the second verse in the first chapter of Genesis. Here you see the indication, as I said, in other books of the Bible, other writings by the prophets, not apostles, but the prophets and the people of God in the Old Testament who were given this information to write down. You find that probably in the beginning, the indication is, here again, without getting into deep weeds here, is that God's highest creation, who was the archangel Lucifer, had been placed in charge over the operation of the universe, including the planet Earth. And who knows, there's some indication, kind of subtle indication, that there probably were many occupied places with beings and civilizations scattered at select areas around the universe. Lucifer's total overseership was not limited just to the earth. And during that time period, Lucifer decided that he wasn't satisfied being number two. Now, you say, well, what about Jesus? Well, there's some very erroneous uh, denominations, religions, or whatever, that teach that Lucifer and Jesus were brothers or whatever. Well, that's a bunch of foolishness. Jesus was not created. Now, at that point in time, he wasn't Jesus. He was the second person of the Trinity, of the Godhead. He was the animation power. He was the Word. And when God spoke, the Word went out and did the creating. And so that was his place at that point in time. Lucifer was the highest created being. And there were some other archangels. There was Michael, who was the archangel placed in governorship or overseership later of the nation of Israel. And then you had Gabriel, who had the job of communication. He's the one that carried the prophecies and so forth and spoke them to Daniel, and we see that in the book of Daniel, especially in the 9th chapter. And so Lucifer decided that he wanted to be number one. Now we get into other things about that there's some indication of places of another giant planet that was in our solar system called Rahab, that was a homeland of Lucifer, and and so forth. And that's getting way too deep in the woods for what we're trying to come up with here, trying to present. But at any rate, Lucifer rebelled, and the upshot of it was that somewhere between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, he got himself kicked out of heaven. Now, it doesn't mean that he was no longer allowed to go into the heavenly area, but his authority was removed, and he took with him a group of angels that had sworn allegiance to him, about a third of the total number, which even at that could have been several trillion angels. I have no idea really how much, just some indications. But at any rate, he was removed from that lofty position, and in the process of that battle, the earth was virtually turned into nothing but a mud ball. All life on the earth, and there had been massive civilizations on the earth. We see evidence of that. There's even archaeological evidence to cities and civilizations that existed long before Adam and Eve, much older than 6,000 years, without getting into a lot of that. But at any rate, and so he's cast down. He's lost his positionship, and then at a certain time, now, if I can make this statement and leave it at that, God initially chose angels to oversee his creation. Even though some of the angels stayed true to their position, many didn't. So that was sort of a semi-failure. And so people say, well, what's the reason for Adam and Eve? God began his work of bringing into existence a family relationship, or the creation of a family that would rule over his creation in love and as volunteers. That's why he gave Adam and Eve the choice. He wasn't interested in creating a slave race. And so at any rate, we know what Adam and Eve did, and they so forth. All right, now the process started when Adam and Eve were removed from the Garden of Eden. There was a holy bloodline that was to come down through Eve, all the way through, and some people call it a scarlet thread, and say that's a good term, but it would go on through a point in time where God would have proven to the human race that they were not able to obey the requirements that he placed on them individually as well as collectively to be the ruling class that he wanted to eventually rule over his whole creation. So this was his main plan all along, without getting into that. But At a point in time, in the fullness of time, uh, God sent forth his Son, the second part of the Trinity, into human form. Uh, People have said half man and half God. No, he was all man and all God, Jesus Christ. And so he paid the sacrifice, uh, the blood sacrifice that would allow human beings to voluntarily come into the kingdom through a thing called rebirth. Now, uh, ever since the Garden of Eden, Lucifer, who became Satan after he fell from grace, or whatever you want to call it, had one goal in mind. He determined, or he found out the hard way, that he could not defeat God the Father. But what he could do is give the family that God was trying to set into motion all kinds of hell, with the desire of ultimately destroying this family and frustrating God's primary plan for what he wanted to do throughout the universe. Okay. And so that's the battle that's been going on. It's been a consistent battle throughout this time period. Now, I've got a couple of scriptures I'd like to, if I can, get them up here on this thing. Yeah, there we go. That looks like it might work. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4, and it says, in whom the God of this world has blinded the minds of them who believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them. Now, this is why, let's just bring it up to modern times. This is why so many of the people that have such hatred for Donald Trump, and incidentally, most of the people, of these people that have such hatred for everything that Donald Trump stands for, there are other splashover beliefs within them. They hate God, a lot of them do. Some of them claim to be various religions and so forth, but if you pin them down, they really don't have any idea who Christ actually is and what the requirement is to come into his family. And so this scripture kind of says it all. Their eyes have been blinded so that they can't see the light of the glorious gospel of Christ. Now, in keeping with that, their eyes are blinded in seeing things that, and I'm going to stretch it just a little bit, I believe the God of this world has blinded the eyes of many of the liberals, the Democrats, not just the United States, but the world over. And I know Democrats don't, not really the world over, but that mentality or that mindset is, so that they literally can look at something that is good, the highest point of that good being the glorious gospel of Christ, and they can't see it. And so how do we respond with it? Now, it brings into focus kind of the main mindset that I want to present is that it's real easy to get angry at people like Alexandria Cortez, the way she acts, the whole Democratic mindset where they approve of putting our nation under socialism, which has been the goal. And we're going to get into the real goal of that, maybe not this time, but how it relates to the future that we're moving into now. But we don't fight against them. Now, does that mean that we don't hold them accountable for things that they do, the evil things they do? Certainly not. But the power behind it, or the way that we approach it, is found in Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, rulers of the darkness of this world, and spiritual wickedness in high places. That is the 4 levels of the military caste system of Satan's army. The principalities, who are the bottom rung, these are the demons and so forth over cities, and I get into a lot of that. We're getting more into that later. But powers, who are authorities maybe over states, rulers of the darkness of this world, possibly these are evil spirits that are given authority over nations. and then spiritual wickedness in high places, and that's the highest hierarchy operating right under Lucifer or Satan, and their job of trying to bring the entire world into subjection to Satan. Okay, that makes sense. Now, real quickly, we're going to take a short break here for a advertisement, and then I'll be right back, and we'll pick it up from there. Okay, welcome back. Now, let me give you a basic kind of preview of coming attractions, a flow of events that we're going to look at in a deeper way. We're going to approach it by talking about the human agents that we could see what they were doing, and then in our next session we'll get into the spiritual entities that were behind pushing them into doing things, and then what the future of all that is going to ultimately be. The first, we could go far back beyond that, like I said, all the way to Adam and Eve and so forth. No point in that. But let's start with in the United States. That's where we'll focus our study. But let's talk about a point in time when there was a shift that took place in Satan's drive to destroy the United States, and that for a particular purpose. The agenda that has been in place for many years was to remove the United States from being an effective power on the world scene. If you look in the Bible at the prophecies concerning what happens in the end time, the nations that will be involved in attempting to destroy Israel, coming together in a coalition. We find a lot of this in Ezekiel 38 and 39, and we're at the point, we're right on the precipice of the war of Ezekiel 28 and 29 taking place. But I want to start at a certain point, and we're going to start with Obama. Obama was positioned to begin to bring the United States into a one world government. Now, the reason for that was that as long as the United States stood in the strength that it presently is, it would be impossible for the world to move into a one world government. Until the world could be brought into a one world government system, God could not move ahead with his finale for the world. Okay, and you'll understand more about what that about that later. So Obama, he was successful, Obama and Biden, to a certain extent, with bringing the United States to a point. A lot of it was worked behind the scenes, as he was systematically making alliances with people who are the enemy of God and the enemy of our lifestyle. And he was successful to a certain extent. Now, Hillary Clinton had been schooled and prepared supernaturally. Hillary Clinton is a very supernatural person. She is involved in a great deal of demonic activity. If you don't believe that, I'd suggest that you get the book Hillary's America, and you'll find a lot in there about her background, as well as the background of the Democratic Party and what their goals actually are. But what she was supposed to do is take the mantle from Obama and continue into the process of bringing the United States into socialism, doing away with our constitutional republic, and opening the way for a one world government. The timing was wrong. Now, I'll get more into that later. But Lucifer was off key. He was pushing too fast to try to do what he thought was his will. And as I mentioned last time, God stuck a stick in Satan's eye, and the name of the stick was Donald J. Trump. And so everything was keyed right up to the last moment for Hillary Clinton to become president. And she would very rapidly move the United States right on into the socialistic situation, so that we would lose our rights, we'd lose our national standing, we would lose the power that we held in the world scene. And all of a sudden, and it was a total surprise to Satan, I think. God caught him totally off guard. And when it happened, and all of a sudden, on the night of the election in 2016, Donald Trump was elected, Satan threw a hissy fit. And through his hissy fit, all of his demons threw hissy fits. And through that, all of the radical left people, the liberals, the Democrats, so forth, the human beings threw a hissy fit, and that hissy fit has continued right up until today. That's the basic reason for all of the accusations, the Russia collusion, which was a hoax that was created and paid for by Hillary Clinton and her group, through the fake impeachment, all of these things were in retaliation for what God did in throwing a monkey wrench in Satan's agenda. Now I want to stop right there, and we're going to pick up next time up to today. What happens? What's going to be the result if Biden is found to have been, and we know that they're trying every way they can to steal this election. They're pulling stuff, and they're not very smart, because they're not even trying to hide their tracks in many cases. They're just letting it all hang out and open-faced, thumbing their nose at the whole world and saying, we're going to steal the election. It may work. I don't know. Maybe by the time we have our next meeting, it may. We'll know whether or not it's going to work. But there are similar reactions to either Trump or Biden being elected. There's also very different reactions in some areas, and the outcome will be the same ultimately. The difference will be that with Trump being elected, there'll be about 4 years or so of possibly a reprieve, but there's going to be hell on earth. These people, through Antifa and ones like that, are going to do everything they can to rip this nation apart. And it's going to come down to the point where real Americans, there's an interesting point, and that's that they estimate that about 70% of all of the guns in the United States are in the hands of conservatives. They don't want to kick too hard. And it may come to that. Hopefully that whoever's in charge will use government forces to try to calm this down before the nation is burned to the ground. But the end result is going to be the same regardless of whether Trump stays in or Biden gets in. So we're going to leave it right there. And next week we're going to try to explore exactly what the outcome of all of this will be. It's not might be. The ultimate outcome will be the same either direction. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, it's a great time. If you're not, it's time to consider your stand, because things are not going to get better. Thank you. God bless you.